All right. Good morning, Chevra. Okay, today's topic that was sent out being that we're going off of Hanukkah and into the regular week. So we're going to stop lighting candles. Um, it's an interesting discussion. One of my thoughts was to actually speak about the transition of lighting candles because we are going to light for a ninth night as opposed to 8 nights because we're going into Shabbos. So it's an interesting. There's interesting discussions about what takes priority, Shabbos candles or Hanukkah candles. But I thought we'd just focus on the concept of being on fire. So we stop lighting fires, but the fire is never supposed to go out. And what does it mean to be on fire? What's the value of being on fire? And I was thinking about a story. Now, I don't know if this story ever happened because I heard it in multiple iterations as a kid growing up. And whether it happened or not is almost irrelevant. But they tell the story of an individual whose job was being the brakeman. The brakeman was the job back in the day before they had the electronic arms when a train was coming to stop the cars from crossing in the middle of the night when a train was coming or whatnot. So they had an individual whose job was to ensure that that would happen. And the way they would do that, if you're one of those people that multitask, you can Google, these lanterns that they used to have that they'd hold up and they'd wave when they would see the train coming in order to tell the train to stop from far away. So his job when he saw the lights coming around the bend was to wave this lantern. So they knew that they had to stop and, any accident would obviously be avoided. Well, one time it happened. I heard the story, anything from he was waving it so the car would stop. He was waving it for the train would stop. The train had to stop because the bridge was up and the train fell into the water. Whatever it was, the guy apparently tried to do his job. It failed. And unfortunately, there was mass casualty as a result of that. There was a huge court case. He was brought in for trial. And when he was on there under oath, he was asked all the questions by both the lawyers. Did you see the train coming? Yes. Were you under the influence of alcohol, or today it'd probably be drugs? No. Were you, like, question after question, did you wave it as soon as you saw it? Yes, yes, yes. Answered everything beautifully and came across in any lie detector like he was completely honest. Then after he got acquitted from the case, someone walked over to him and said, "You know what? You did an amazing job. Like that. You testified it so beautifully." He said, "Listen, I answered every question honestly." They said, "So I don't understand how the accident happened. It just doesn't make sense." He says, "Well, the truth is, there's one question that they didn't ask me, and I prayed that they wouldn't ask me this question. The question that they should have asked, which they didn't, was your lights in the lantern lit when you were waving it frantically?" He said, "The mistake that I made is that it wasn't on fire. The fire was out." And the idea of the penetration of that story, right, is simply that many times in life, or the way at least I understand that, is we're going through motions. We're doing the actions. We rise when we have to rise. We sit when we have to sit, right? We light when we have to light. We say kiddush when we go through the motions, and we might do them all, but there's this pilot light that sometimes seems to not be on. And the importance isn't that we just do what we do. It's the question is whether or not we're on fire. And what does it mean to look like on fire? How do we see that from Hanukkah? One of the ways in which we do that? And what are some of the, let's say, benefits or results on being on fire? So first I figured we would look at one little halacha, one of the laws around lighting. It's interesting. A lot of people define themselves as different types of Jews of level of observance, right? There's a spectrum of what people do or don't do. What's really interesting when it comes to Hanukkah, I'm going to imagine that just about everybody on this Zoom is actually like ultra Haredi, like super fanatic. Not just like, not, you don't just do Hanukkah, you are Hanukkah fanatics. And why is that you're a Hanukkah fanatic? Well, it's simple. Because if I said, "What did you do on day one of Hanukkah?" You'd say, "Well, Rabbi, I lit a candle." So if I ask you, you can either answer this question or you can put up your fingers. What did you do on the second day of Hanukkah? How many candles did you light? So you'd probably say, I imagine, two candles. We're not getting into the shamas, and three and four and five and so on. Right? Now, the reality is actually probably if you would ask Lipner, "Hey, how many candles did you have in your house?" On day two, I wouldn't have even said two, right? We have multiple people here. So I think we happen to have had four of our kids in town at this point lighting. So there's mine and there's theirs. So on day two, we actually had 10, a lot of candles, right? The reality is that really the mitzvah is what's called ner ushabeso. Everybody's home has one candle, right? If you wanted to fulfill the mitzvah perfectly, just like I've done my bit. I'm not a fanatic. I'm not crazy. I don't have to do it like, just tell me what I have to do. All you have to do is day one, light one candle. Day two, light one candle. Day three, light one candle. And you'd have a much smaller box of Hanukkah candles that just fit 8 candles, and you'd be fine. You would have fulfilled the mitzvah. Now, I personally don't know anybody that does that. Back in the days, there were lots of questions when people couldn't afford to buy the 44 pack. So then that would be a little bit more difficult. Nowadays, where it seems like there's no problem for people to afford 44 candles, everybody seems to light multiple candles, but you don't have to. So why don't we? Because the Talmud says, even though the basic mitzvah is ner ishu beso, everybody's got to light one candle. There's what's called mahadran. Mahadran means if you really want to go like, beautify this one, you want to do something special, you want to be a little bit more zealous in what you're doing, it's everybody lights one candle per person in the house. So if I have 8 kids in my house, there'd be 9 candles on day 1, 9 candles on day 2, 9 candles on day 3, and so on and so forth. And that would me being not just basic level, that'd be me like, okay, I'm upping it a notch, Mahadran. But then the Gemara goes on, and this is what I probably most of us do, if not everybody, what's called mahadran min mahadran. What happens when a person says, I want to not just do it. I don't want to just do it really well. I want to do it like awesomely well. And in that situation, everybody lights, and everybody lights another candle per day. So as opposed to it being, let's say, just one candle in my house every single night, base level. Second level would be everybody lights a candle in my house, so that'd be 9 candles, right? Last night, if I would have had all my kids at home, we would have 72 candles that were lit. If you put the shamas in, can I do the math? That's a number 9. 81 candles, a serious fire hazard, right? Just to say I'm going to go ahead and do the best that I can possibly do, which is interesting because a lot of people are just like, get by Jews, right? Myself in certain areas, I'm just like, you know what? It's good enough. I think there was a book or a saying like, good enough is the enemy of great or something like that. Like it's good enough. But on Hanukkah, for some reason, like no other holiday, we say to ourselves, good enough isn't going to be good enough. Everybody can get by. You can do pretty good or you can do awesome, right? You can be not just lighting the fire, but the way you light your fire, you could be on fire. And the way you tell whether somebody really cares about something is if they just do enough to get by, if they do the minimum amount, you know that perhaps maybe they're just going through the motions to check the box a little bit, right? When I tell my kids, set the table, right? I'll see whether they're on fire that day or not. If the cutlery is just thrown on the middle there and the plates are kind of there, if I walk outside, as we were blessed to do today, somehow they decided to be on fire, right? They've got even the napkins and the cups that are sitting out there in a pretty little fold. Like the place looks amazing. Maybe because after 8 days of being on fire, lighting their candles, they're feeling a different way about what they do. But the way you can demonstrate, and this is sort of a two-edged sword, right? There's the idea of "Macharei pulot nimshachot levavot," a very famous phrase that's written by the Sefer HaChinuch, right? A book that goes through every single mitzvah. It's said that book was written for him to give it over to his children to explain what we do and more importantly, why we do it as well. And he says that we're drawn after our actions. So on one hand, you can tell if a person's on fire by how much they go into that. How quickly they run to the gym in the morning versus how quickly they run to their chavrusa in the morning versus how quickly they run to get into Shabbos versus how quickly they run to get out of Shabbos. You can tell, right? On the flip side, we also can control it, meaning the more that we put into it. So on Hanukkah, we say, go all out, because if you go all out, you will become on fire. If you just sat in your window and said, another one light, another one light, another one light, you'd eventually be like, okay, we did it. If every day you feel that you're increasing that light, then that has an impact on the individual themselves. I always feel different on day 1 of Hanukkah, looking at our pithy little one candle, right, which is beautiful, versus the last day, though, when it's like, it's awesome. Because the house isn't on fire, thank God, but it looks like it's on fire, right? So I think that's the second point that's important. Number 1 is to realize that if you're going through the motions without that fire, you're not going to achieve what you want. Hanukkah, in the middle of the darkness, when it's easy to be not on fire, it says that's when you've got to rekindle and continue to add, so that's the way that you're operating. And there's 2 values in terms of, there are many, but we'll focus on just 2 with the few minutes that we have left, of what's the value of being on fire. So number 1, I think, is perhaps maybe understood from one of the miracles that it says in Pirkei Avos, in the Ethics of Our Fathers, that it said happened on Temple Mount. says one of the 10 different miracles, right? We might be the holiday of miracles, but we believe the miracles happened all around, right? And one of the miracles that happened on Temple Mount, he said, the fire on Temple Mount never went out. So even if it was raining, even if it was windy, if there was a tornado, if there was a hurricane, that fire never extinguished, right? So I know that, when you sit there and you're trying to light your bonfire in your backyard, right, and it's a little bit windy, it's hard to get it going. This one, no matter what the elements were, it always stayed lit. So the question is asked, okay, so I get it, that's a miracle. But the question is asked, the miracle could have been done a different way, meaning it's pretty miraculous if you see a deluge of water coming down on Temple Mount and crazy windstorm happening and it doesn't go out. That's a pretty, that's a slightly more radical uh, miracle than's necessary. And the principle is whenever miracles happen for another time, we try to, God tries to minimize the miracle, right? If it has to get done, but not in the most miraculous way, in the more natural way. So they said, what would have been a greater, simple way of doing the miracle? Just make it that over Temple Mount, it doesn't rain. It doesn't get windy. It's like, sometimes there are places that are wind tunnels. This could be like a wind-free chamber that for whatever reason, it just never got windy on Temple Mount. You wouldn't notice the miracle in the same way as when it's pouring and the water doesn't go out. Or if it wasn't ever raining on there and it just happened to be that that's because of the topography, it didn't rain over there. It always missed by. You'd be like, okay, that's kind of interesting. It never rains, but I get it. As opposed to it's raining like crazy, but it's not going out. So I saw a beautiful explanation about why it had to be in this direction. See, the idea being perhaps that in life it rains, it storms, there's catastrophes that happen all around us. And a person might feel like there is no way that my fire can stay lit, despite or as a result of rather all the things that are happening around me. But the miracle of not just lighting a fire, but being on fire means that even when a person's in that space of darkness, even when they're living through their torrential downpour of life that's happening, if a person's not on fire, right, unfortunately what happens is, or it's not solid fire, they can't handle it, right? And they go to dark places as a result. If a person feels, wait, I'm on fire and my fire never goes out, it means whatever a person has that they're facing, and this is sort of the secret of that Jewish last jug of oil that was there. We always have that flask of pure oil that's there to keep our flame. If a person realizes that, then no matter what life throws their way, they will always be able to maintain that fire through life. And I don't know if it's just me at the age of 50 or whether I think it's more the generation. I don't think 40 or 50 years ago it resonated as much as maybe today, where there seems to be so many things which seem to go ahead and try to extinguish our fire on an emotional level, on a world level. But we have to understand if a person is on that pure fire, then it can go ahead and overcome any of the storms that gets thrown its way. And that's one purpose of being on fire versus just lighting a fire. And the second one, and I think maybe this ties in a little bit with a not mentioning, which I appreciate how she shared something we shared last week with others, is that the only way you can light other people's fire is if you yourself are on fire. Meaning there's so many things that we want to give over, whether it be to our children or our grandchildren, whether it want to be in our community involvement. We know and sense the difference when a person gets up there and either says what has to be said because it has to be said, versus when they're on fire with the message or the vision of what they want to achieve. I was just in a meeting with someone in Federation the other day. I introduced a new person to Adam, and we are having a discussion. There were 4 or 5 people there, but the one who was the head of it, like he came late. I'm like, we can't start the meeting till he's there because this is the guy who's on fire. Just being there and hearing his passion and his commitment and his vision. The guys, other people might say the same words, and they're wonderful people, but there's a spark that's in this individual which just illuminates. And therefore, being on fire both helps the individual maintain during difficult times, and it enables a person to be able to ignite the fire in others, which we're all meant to do. Right? So just to recap and then wish everyone a good Shabbos, right? Number one is going through the motions without fire, right? Like that train brake stop person, whatever, brakeman, right? It will not work at the end of the day. Number two, how do you come on fire? You can see a person on fire if they're doing not the minimum, but not even the maximum sheba maximum. And if a person isn't on fire, just like when they say if a person's depressed, don't stay in bed all day, get up. You've got to be active. So if a person doesn't feel on fire, then find that thing that you're looking at and don't just do it, oh, I'll just get through it. Find a way to move yourself to do it in the best way possible. When a person is on fire, ironically, I'm the one that benefits from it because no matter what gets thrown my way, I'm able to persevere over it like the Jews have always done. And then ultimately, I have the ability to take the fire that I'm on and share that with others as well. So want to thank everyone for jumping on. I think we kept it to 15 minutes. It's awesome. We can stop the recording. If there are any questions, feel free. And wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and enjoy the last few hours of Hanukkah while it's there. Great to see everyone.
Good job.